Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2018 Preschool Mindfulness Summit. I'm very happy to introduce our next guest, Joree Rose. And Joree is a speaker, an author, and an educator. And she has written a children's book called Squirmy Learns to Be Mindful, which we're going to be hearing about later on. And she's also written another book for older primary children, which she'll tell us a bit about later on as well. So thank you so much for joining us and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Helen. I so appreciate you bringing me into this summit, and I'm honored to be part of it.
Great. So you're a parenting expert, especially parenting and mindfulness together.
Yes.
So first of all, can you just tell us what you mean? What do we mean when we say mindful parenting?
Yeah, and I'll let you know, I've got 2 daughters of my own, and I'm also a marriage family therapist. So I work with a lot of parents, and I live these tools and these practices daily, personally, professionally. It's been my background, my education, and my practice for many years. So when we talk about mindfulness, when I actually used to work in a school teaching mindfulness to children, and it was pre-K through 8th grade. And when I was talking with children, I would define mindfulness with one word: simply being aware.
Right. Okay.
And when I work with adults and with parents, I expand that definition to define mindfulness as living with greater awareness, attention, and intention.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, of course, we use the breath as an anchor to come back to the present moment. And especially when I work with kids, we use so many different tools in addition to just the breath as a way and a tool to come back into the present moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes with kids, when you tell them to breathe, they sound like Darth Vader. So we've got to give them some other good tools to be able to access their breath without changing and altering it in a way that's going to still be calming for them.
Right. Right. Yes, not the opposite. Yeah, I really love that. Just be aware, because the more simple we can make it for kids, the more they can grasp.
Yeah, and when I expand on what do I mean by awareness, it's being aware of what's going on inside of you as well as what's going on around you. So inside of it is awareness of our thoughts, our emotions, our sensations in our body, and awareness of what's around us, and being able to open up our peripheral vision, being able to see outside of what's just straight in front of us and expand that view. And the kids get it. They really, really do. Even the little ones that I've worked with.
Yeah, yeah. So I know you have a lot of good ideas and strategies that the parents, especially the teachers too, are going to want to hear on this call. So and these kind of questions I get asked a lot in my Facebook group or people that I work with, and one of them is how do you calm a child when they're having a temper tantrum?
Okay. This is absolutely one of my favorite questions that I get as well. And as you mentioned in my intro, I do a lot of mindful parenting work. And it's actually over the years, I have gone from working mostly only with kids to expanding and working with the parents. And I love giving the parents these tools because they have the ability to shift the entire culture in the home and make lasting change for the whole family, and being able to role model these tools to their children. Because what often happens was, my experience is, kids would learn these tools, their parents don't have them. And then I think it's confusing to the kids when they say, "Mom, you need to breathe. Like, take a deep breath. You need to breathe."
Yeah.
So parents always ask me this question as well: what do I do when my kid is having a temper tantrum? And they will tell me it's really hard to stay present, to stay mindful, to stay in the moment, to stay calm, to find their breath when they're getting triggered and they're getting overwhelmed. So this is a concept that I came up with a couple of years ago, that I was speaking at a parenting conference in our school district. And here's what I told parents, and this usually always gets them to cry because it touches heartstrings inside of them. Because it's, we feel this pain very deeply when we see our children in pain. But here's my scenario. Here's what I think happens. imagine you're having an emergency and you call 911 and you scream into the phone, "Oh my God, the house is on fire." Could you imagine if the 911 operator responded to you in the same level of intensity in which you called?
Right.
If the 911 operator was like, "Oh my God, get out of the house," you would probably freak out.
Yes.
Well, this is often what parents do when their children are having a tantrum. They get triggered, they get overwhelmed, they react, they yell at their kids to calm down when they're the ones also raising their voice.
Right.
So this is what I tell parents: you need to be the 911 operator.
Right.
Because that 911 operator is trained to stay calm. They don't even have to see your face for you to feel calm in their presence. So when they say, take a deep breath, calm down, and they actually do that as well at the same moment, it inherently is going to calm down the caller. So this is what the best tool I give to parents is, okay, your job is to be the 911 operator. And they're like, "Oh my God, that's so good."
It's such a great analogy, isn't it? And something that people will just really remember.
Well, and I think it's very visual and very visceral, right?
Yeah.
Because we all know how overwhelming it gets when our kids are stuck. And so often when our kids are having a tantrum, they cannot access their breath. They don't have the ability. They're operating from their emotional brain. So their prefrontal cortex and executive functioning is shut down. So when we tell them to take a deep breath and calm down, they often can't even access that. So one of the ways that we can help them is in that model of being the 911 operator, we can be like a surrogate breather for them when we can stay calm and even name what's arising and be able to say, "Wow, I'm noticing you're so overwhelmed right now. It's really even hard for you to catch your breath. And I'm noticing in my own body, I'm feeling really overwhelmed. So I'm going to take a minute, slow down, and take a few deep breaths." And if I can teach the parents to literally role model that and stop and close their eyes, it'll help calm the child down without them even having to really do much. Easier said than done, I know, but it's a practice.
Yeah, and if you keep doing it, it turns into a habit and becomes.
It does. And, you know, I think the kids are going to often take cues from their parents. And I think it's very confusing, the conflicting message that they receive, calm down, but they're not taught how because the parents aren't doing it.
Right, yeah.
And it's no fault of their own, you know, but it's hard.
Yeah, so important, definitely. Another question that I get asked is about feeling like your life or your home is chaotic and you have kids and their school bags everywhere to take them to soccer practice and drop the other one off at dance and make the dinner and kids are eating in the car and it's all chaotic. So what advice do you have for parents who just feel like, how can I even start to practice mindfulness in this environment?
Well, Helen, this is another one of my favorite questions. I have a course that I've developed, a 6-week course that I teach in mindfulness, and I do group classes, and I've adapted that to also do parenting classes, which are coming soon online. So everyone stay tuned. But I once had a mom ask me this very question where she said to me, you know, my mindfulness practice is really good up until the moment the kids get in the car after school. And then she said, my mindfulness practice just goes out the window.
Yeah.
And, you know, after school, we pick up our kids and there's the homework and there's the carpooling, like you said, and the extracurricular activities and the dinner and the bath time and the bedtime. And sometimes you've got kids who were at their sports until 9 p.m. at night, or there's a lot of pressure for schoolwork and the house, like you said, and the laundry and the chores. I mean, it's completely chaotic. So again, sometimes parents feel very emotional when I will say this, and I love when I can touch those heartstrings to make them in tune to what emotions are coming up. But here's what I say to parents. I'm going to make the assumption that we all became parents by choice. The majority of us, I'm going to make that assumption. I became parents by choice, knowing it's messy and it's loud and it's chaotic and it's dirty and it's sticky and it's frustrating and it's amazing, all of those things. And we entered into this by choice. And so what I tell parents is to choose gratitude for the chaos, because one day your house is going to be really, really and you are going to be missing that mess and that chaos and that noise. And, you know, gratitude is such a component, a fundamental component of mindfulness. And if we can remember in that moment to choose gratitude, it doesn't negate the negative that's arising, but it does help diffuse and allow us to respond differently to it, respond with greater intention of, yeah, this is really chaotic right now, and it's not going to last forever. It's just in this moment.
Yeah,
So that's the best advice I can give to parents, is to choose gratitude for what you brought into your life on purpose.
right.
Knowing it's not always going to be
yeah, exactly. That's really lovely. I think sometimes we forget about it, don't we, when it's you know, and we're like, why is it like this? And I know my older daughter moved out last year, and I have two daughters as well, so I'm like missing her, right? Where's all the noisy on the floor?
There was a great article I read that I'd popped around. I think, you know, I saw a link on Facebook a while back about this woman who went to a friend's house, and her house was so clean, she still had the carpet lines from the vacuum cleaner.
Right.
And she was like, why can't my house be like that? And she realized, oh, because I have children. Yeah. And as long as I have children in the home, those vacuum lines are not going to be there.
Exactly.
And that's a beautiful thing, because when the vacuum lines remain, it means no one's walking through your home.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So it's a matter of choosing gratitude. And the other piece of that I tell parents too is to practice self-compassion, which, once again, easier said than done, but to have self-compassion for, yeah, this is really hard. You know, and there's no rule book on how to be a parent. So we're going through trial and error, and what worked yesterday is not going to work today. So that comes to the part of being present and really parenting to the kid you have, not the one you think you have or hope you have or wished you had, and recognizing that day to day, your one child to the next is going to be very different. And so to have the self-compassion for, well, I had it figured out yesterday, what's wrong with today? Well, today's a new day. And yet it's a new moment to practice these tools every moment. And kids are quite forgiving too. You know, the other thing, to also go back to your previous question with the tantrums, one of the things that I also work with parents on advising is to own up when they have overreacted. To be able to come back and say, wow, you know what? I was so overwhelmed. I forgot how to speak kindly and how not to raise my voice. And I'm guessing that didn't make you feel very good. And that didn't make me feel very good. And you know what? Mommy's going to practice a little bit more on these tools, because I bet I can work a little bit harder. So I like to give parents the reminder to show your kids that you're working on it. And that makes them feel a little bit more connected to you during the process. And you can help each other out in these tools to remind each other.
I love that. And also, nobody's perfect, right? And
no,
kids can see that, you know, you're not perfect. They're not supposed to be perfect. And
and I think everything that, and everything that we as parents do, we are role modeling to our children. So when we can own up when we've acted in a way that we've missed the mark or that we know was unskillful, to be able to say, yeah, and here's what I'm going to try to do different next time.
Yeah, great. So what kind of things would you recommend parents put in place to have better discipline in the home, or create a calmer, kinder environment inside of the house?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I started when my daughters were young, and it's been one of the most effective tools as far as discipline, is to guide them. And we started this when they were about 5. So we can do this at a pretty young age. Guide them to have more accountability in their actions. So it's kind of a twofold thing that I talk about with parents is, if we can teach kids more agency around their actions and more accountability, that they're not, quote, behaving to please us, but they're doing so in a way that there's natural consequence. So if they can learn from a young age what those natural consequences is to their actions, in my experience, both personally and professionally, a lot of the negative behaviors will slough off on their own. And coupled with that is when a child is, I hate to even say the word misbehaving. I had a mentor who once taught me there's no such thing as a problem child, only a child with a problem. So if we can have that mindset, and I always tell parents, when your kid is acting out in some negative behavior, if you can momentarily pause from giving the consequence or reacting to the negative behavior, you'll come back to it, but momentarily pause and loop around and try to tap into what is emotionally going on with their child. If, it's my assumption and assertion that there's always an emotion driving a behavior.
Right.
So if we can compassionately and empathically connect with their emotional experience, again, in my experience personally and professionally, those negative behaviors, once a child feels validated, heard, and understood, tend to diminish.
Right.
So it's this twofold process, which is easier said than done with all of this, because those negative behaviors are very triggering. But I've also learned giving a timeout, taking a toy away, may momentarily pause the negative behavior, but it's not shifting it long term. It's just not. And so one of the things that we've developed in our home, and my daughter is now 14 and almost 12, and we've been doing this since my oldest was about 5, is we had what we called a consequence book.
Right.
And I'm actually coming out with the book to help parents guide children in this consequence book as well. That's on the horizon. And what I would do is, if my daughter did something wrong, I would have her write it down.
Okay.
And when she was really little, I would write it down for her. But there was 3 things that would go into the consequence book. 1, what was it you did wrong? So maybe it was a matter of I lied about brushing my teeth, which little kids do all the time. So what you did wrong was I lied about brushing my teeth. The second thing is, what could you have done different? Well, I could have either brushed my teeth, or I could have been honest about not brushing my teeth. But the third thing, and this is where the agency and accountability comes in, is I would have my daughter write down what her consequence was if she were to lie again.
Right.
Because inevitably they're going to mess up again. Inevitably, they're learning, and this is how they grow. So next time she lied about something, I didn't have to get mad at her, because I'm actually on her side rooting for her. And I can have a lot of compassion for, like, oh man, really? Like that, I was really rooting for you here. So I would go get the consequence book and say, what did you say would happen if you lied again? And maybe it was, taking away her favorite TV show for 3 days, whatever it was. I had to approve the consequence by all means. But let me tell you, when the consequence came from my children, the effectiveness, because they weren't doing it just to please me or not please me. It became a matter of they wanted to do it for themselves. And over the years, my daughter is now 14, I can honestly say, as a teenager, there's very, very, very little raising voice in my house. And there's really no consequences, because she is acting in a way that she knows there's natural consequence.
Yeah.
And so I get to not have a hierarchical, I still have respect and control as the parent, but I'm guiding her to be accountable.
Right.
And not just to behave in a way that I want her to, but in a way of, who do you want to be? How do you want people to see you? How do you want to go into someone's home and have people feel about you being there, or in a class or at school? This is about you. Like, I love you regardless.
Right.
These are your ways to move through the world.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. That it's coming from the child themselves, and yeah, I'm sure that's making a huge difference, isn't it?
And the key to making this work is for parents to be consistent, because I find the hardest problem with discipline and with those temper tantrums is that parents aren't consistent.
Right. Yes.
And maybe because their mood is fluctuating or something else is going on in their life. And so if they can be consistent time and time and time again, then the kids know what to expect.
Right. Yeah. Consistency, I think, is so important in our own actions and what we teach the children. And
Yeah.
they pick up on everything. So
well, and they see where the loopholes, they pick up also where the loopholes are when we're not consistent.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Those are great ideas. So I wanted to learn more about the children's book that you have, Squirmy Learns to Be Mindful. So what was the inspiration for writing the book, and how did you come up with the character?
Yeah. I started about, 2011 working at a school. That was the pre-K through 8th grade school that I was working at for 4 years, where I was teaching mindfulness in the classroom. And at the time, there was very, very, very few, and there still are very few, but at the time there was very few books for children that weren't overly Buddhist in nature, that I could feel comfortable reading in a school setting. And even in a school setting, I'm very cautious to use the word meditation. And I simply call it mindful breathing. We're breathing with awareness. So, and this happened to be a private school I was working at, but I was also doing some work in public schools and doing like PTA talks and going into some classrooms at times. So I had to be very, very cognizant of my languaging and the context in which I was teaching these tools.
Right.
And I am very much maintaining its roots in its Buddhist context, but teaching it in a secular way that a school setting isn't going to give me any flack for, or have any, nervous parents of teaching the Buddhism. So when I recognized that while there were some great books out there, I didn't have a lot of resource to read books to kids to teach them these skills. And at the time I was a school counselor, and I was receiving a catalog that was for K through 12 books for kids, for school counselors or therapists or educators to use in a school setting. And I noticed that they had no mindfulness books in their catalog. So I told myself, I'm going to be their mindfulness person. And I came up with this book about Squirmy. And it was, a very simple, sweet way to teach kids these tools of being patient, being in the present, learning the skills of gratitude and slowing down, and having to work through anxiety of what's coming next versus what's here. And so that's how Squirmy Learns to Be Mindful came to be.
Okay, great. Lovely. I'm going to order those for the schools I work with in Hong Kong. I think they're
fabulous.
Yeah. And you have a new project coming out that you just mentioned before.
The same publisher I just mentioned, they approached me on doing a workbook style guide. So it's coming out in the 2018 catalog, and it's called Mindfulness. It's Elementary. And it's a guide for school counselors, educators, therapists, or even parents to guide children through the cultivation of a mindfulness practice. The book is being marketed towards 3rd through 6th graders. However, I believe it could be taught to children much younger. These tools are, like the book says, pretty elementary. And I also believe they could be taught to older kids as well, maybe just shift some of the languaging. But I wrote it in such a way that even though it's being marketed towards a certain age group, I really think almost any age children could adapt to it. And it covers 12 different mindfulness lessons, breathing, body awareness, body movement, mindful seeing, listening, mindful eating, walking, gratitude, compassion, loving kindness, mindfulness of our thoughts, mindfulness of our emotions, mindful communication. I don't know if that was all 12, but that gives you the idea. And it gives a guide in how to guide a meditation practice through each of these skills, like a script per se. So it gives an overview and like a script to be able to guide students, discussion questions, follow-up. And then after each exercise is an activity sheet that's intended to be a personal self-reflection. Sometimes they're little games or thoughts. to journal. So it's like a journal prompt for each lesson. And then there's included at the back games and activities that can be done for groups and class sizes that highlights which mindfulness lessons that game is supposed to highlight.
Yeah. Great. Wow. Sounds like a great resource for parents and teachers. And
yeah, I'm really proud of it. It has a very lengthy introduction. So it really, even if the person in guiding the students don't have a mindfulness practice, there's enough in the introduction to give them context, and there's resources in there as well for them to access in addition to my websites that I have, because I really believe it's hard to teach mindfulness if you don't have your own practice. So I wanted to give the instructor enough tools to cultivate their own practice before guiding students as well.
Great. Well, we're coming up to the end of our time, but I wanted to just ask you one last question. What would you recommend a parent who's very new to this? What's the first thing that they could do at home, a simple thing that doesn't take much time that they could implement?
Yeah, you know, I think that's the greatest challenge parents have, is finding the time. And this is where I tell parents, you know, mindfulness isn't something to add to your to-do list. It's what should be on part of your to-be list. Who do you want to be? How do you want to respond? How do you want to move through your day? With what level of awareness, attention, intention, presence, whether it's with your children, with your partner, with your spouse, or even just with your chores and the way you're going about your day. So I recommend parents to, first of all, meet themselves where they're at. Don't have an expectation that you need to sit and meditate for 20 to 40 minutes a day, because that's likely not going to happen. So I'd rather parents find 1 to 2 minutes, maybe 2 times a day, even just once a day to start, of slowing down and connecting with their breath. So maybe it's when they first wake up in the morning, before they jump out of bed, after they've turned their alarm off, just lie in bed. Maybe put your hand on your chest or your diaphragm just to connect with your body. Take a few mindful breaths, breathing in slowly, exhaling out slowly, and maybe setting an intention for the day. And that intention can be only a breath away as you go about your day. Or maybe it's during the transition point from driving the kids to and from school. In fact, I had a mom I worked with that going to school was a big anxious moment for the whole family, as it often is. And she started doing transitions in the car where on the way to school, they, as a family, I think she had 2 daughters, they would practice breathing on the way to school. And they would just have some quiet moments. So when they got to school, they could all be calm and ready to start their day. So I think those transition moments are really powerful. Anytime, you know, we sit down at our computer to check our email or even get a text, you know, that text is not going to disappear. It's not going to be a mission impossible. And that message won't disappear if you don't respond to it within the first 5 seconds. So use those sounds, use those transitions as reminders to slow down.
Yeah.
So I think it's really starting simply and really being kind to yourself, and practicing that self-compassion is a big piece of it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for sharing all those ideas and thoughts. And
thank you so much for having me.
And we'll have there's a button that says more information about the speaker, so we'll have the links to the books and to your website there.
Fabulous.
More about Joree, and also I think she's provided a freebie as well for you that you can download. So thank you once again for coming on. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. And I do just want to mention the download that I'm offering. It's a booklet that I created called Take a Mindful Minute, and it's intended for parents and kids to cultivate a joint mindfulness practice. So it's a little booklet that they can work on together. And I've heard from parents, they keep it on their nightstands. I've heard that teenagers take photos of each page to keep to have on their phones. So I hope that you guys enjoy that. And thank you so much, Helen, for having me today.
Thank you. All right, let's keep in touch.
Absolutely. Take care.